Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal, where we invite you to explore the heart and soul of our company, Kivi Brothers Trucking. Through engaging storytelling, insightful market updates, and vibrant energy, our podcast reflects our culture, values, and achievements. Whether you're a team member or industry enthusiast, join us to build connections, foster growth, and inspire excellence. Discover why we're more than just a company. We're a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those aspiring to be part of something extraordinary. The pre-trip is complete and engines ready. We're set to hit the road on the Keep Trucking Personal podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal. My name is Tyler Kivi, and I am your host. This time of year is always exciting. It's exciting for me, and I think it's exciting for really anyone in the industry, but weather is starting to warm up. We're starting to get warmer temperatures. Optimism comes just from that warmth. I know personally, for me, these last few days, where I live in Kentucky, it was 70 degrees. So we hit that, and it's like summer's here. You're ready to go, construction season. But nonetheless, this is the start kind of our busy season. And we have road restrictions going on in the northern part of the country, in Minnesota, Michigan. All of those areas start to see the road restrictions, and construction companies want to get large machinery delivered prior, get job sites started up. Some of the roads get a little mushy, and you can kind of talk about that. My guest again, Derek, you can kind of talk about the soft parking lot and the type of spring that we see every year in Duluth. For me, it's exciting. For you, you're probably like, sheesh, we got these roads and parking lots that get real soft.
As you said, you guys hit 70. We've been getting 40-degree days here, so we're in the same mindset, I guess you could say. Snow is
dwindling.
Almost gone, but we're also in that spring thaw and the dirt and the mud and the ruts and the soft spots. And I was just going out into a shop and walk across the parking lots and had to stop in the shop and find something to scrape my boots off because I had mud stuck to the bottom of them. Yeah. So now is the time of year. The unfortunate part is for the cleaning gals. I really feel for them because these offices get destroyed. We don't have blacktop parking lots here at our facilities just because we have, one, it's extremely expensive, but two, we run some high scrub application equipment and heavy haul. I'm pretty sure our blacktop would be destroyed in the first year. So we've always just stuck to the gravel and it is what it is, but you get your frost spots that heave up in the soft spots and they're here. And I hate this time of year in that respect. Vehicles just get everything's muddy. Boots are muddy and I'm, obviously involved in all aspects. So I destroy clothes this time of year, but
you got the definition of wear your work clothes. So when you go to work, you're wearing the dirty, you can get them all covered in mud and whatever you got to do.
Yeah. We just got out of the previous couple of weeks.
Long Johns.
Long Johns. Trucks were coming in absolutely caked in just white road salt with a crust on them. Wearing my winter jacket, just destroyed. I had to wash it, I don't know how many times in a row after just going out there and whether we were moving something or helping out with something. And that the salt was just horrible. Trucks were getting just covered. Well, the whole country was getting drilled with weather.
Yeah.
And, they get up here, it's still cold. So all that snow, ice, buildup, everything is still on the trailer. So we went from one extreme cold to all of a sudden, boom, 40 degrees. And now it's swim trunks. Probably going to go suntan a little later tonight out here in the balmy 30 degree weather.
Something else that's kind of funny that not talking about the seasons, but kind of related is for me, it was just before November, I had stopped shaving. And I think you're probably similar. So people can't see us right now, but we both have beards. And that warmth also kind of invites the excitement to hey, maybe it's time to shave this off. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And it's funny because I've had people recently looking at me and I'm looking at them and we're making eye contact and it's kind of like how you doing? And they're still looking at you like, why are you staring at me right now? And they come up after and they're like, I can't believe that I didn't say hi earlier. I didn't realize you had a beard like that. And I'm like, yeah, I've been buckled in, holding on to this one. So I don't know how long to ride it out. Do you have an idea how long you're going to go before you decide to shave it off?
I don't know. There's obviously it's helpful up here in the Arctic circle. When you're out in the wintertime, it does help. But now with 40-degree days, there's times where when you think about it, and then it's like, no, should I? The last time I shaved, Charlie, my daughter, got upset because she said I looked like Mayor Humdinger, which
Paw Patrol.
I don't know how weird looks like Mayor Humdinger with a mustache, but for whatever reason, she was upset that I shaved. So
that's funny because that was the same
stash.
I didn't get that same response, but when I had shaved my beard off, right away, they're like, I want it back. And I'm like, well, that was a commitment. That wasn't just overnight. I don't get it overnight. So then you put in, 5 months growing and you start to kind of get a little bit attached to it where you're like, I could shave this off. And I think, like you said, there's some fun stages you can go through and you shave it off. You can go with the handlebars, you can go with the chops, you can go with a bunch of different variations, ending up finally in a big bushy mustache, which is, it's hard to even look at yourself in the mirror, let alone go out in public. But it's exciting to have those. Like when the time comes, I'm excited to run through that progression and give everybody a taste of all the like I said, the handlebars and the lamb chops and the big mustache. And I know you've done it a few times, and there is nothing funny. I still have that picture. There is nothing funnier than when you are used to seeing somebody with a beard, a bunch of facial hair, and they come back and it's shaved off and all they have is a little bit of handlebars or a big mustache. Yeah, I did a pretty good one last year.
Yeah, you did. There was even some drivers that come in like, I can't even look at you.
I'm right now, I feel bad for our wives when I think of what they're going to have to deal with, because it will happen here this summer and spring. I'm sure not too far away. Like I said, I've had the itch a few times. But I'm also like, I put 5 months into this beard. I might need to make sure I'm ready, because
there's days where it's kind of funny. There's I think two nights ago, Tate grabbed me by the side of the beard and gave me a good old jerk and about ripped my cheek off. And I was like, holy man, side of my face hurt the whole rest of the day. So then I was like, all right, maybe it's time to shave. I got a 1-year-old ripping me around by my beard.
Yeah, there's nothing easy. I thought, there's a fun fact. You don't have to shave and you can just let it go, but it still needs maintenance. And it's still, I eat some chicken wings the other day and I had more chicken wing sauce in my beard than I had on my in my mouth.
You save that for later.
Yeah, no kidding. Had some eggs from the other morning still in my beard when I got to work. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Somebody could have told me. But nonetheless, I'm excited to talk about this topic. And this one is a little bit of just what it takes to secure a load out on the road. And I want to talk about some of your earlier days and some of your experiences you've had with talking to customers, but then also understanding how brokers play a pivotal role in filling those little gaps, and just learn about how we communicate, how we navigate, and how we negotiate. And I wish that we could have Dad on this podcast. I wish he was in tune with this type of stuff, because he has the most old school baseline on how to secure freight. And he holds his ground. And I think it's when you know trucking and you know it well, he's confident in this is how it's going to happen and we're going to work it out or not. And 9 times out of 10, he comes back with a success story. And for those of you that don't know, over the road trucking is a game of moving shipments. Some lanes are very dense. And when I say dense, I mean you move 10 loads from the same origin to the same destination and 10 loads in that same destination area back towards their origination. So you're starting to build density. You're going back and forth in those lanes. And there's times though with new manufacturing like we serve that you end up out of network, we'll call it. You land in the middle of Missouri, and that's not common. And you have to find a freight, some sort of, you have to find freight in general, but you have to use a broker or load board or an old previous connection to get a load for that truck. And so that's the synopsis we're going to talk about. Derek, when you think back to some of your earliest days of booking freight for trucks out on the road, what do you remember? What do you think?
To the early days?
Yeah, like back. I also think maybe if you could kind of tell the context behind how the load boards and stuff were even back then.
Well, it's kind of comical to think about, because it was about as ridiculous as you can imagine. We had a DAT screen, but they supplied you with the computer. It was a green screen computer, and basically the loads that were on there, whatever was on there, you got in the morning, and that was about it for the day. So early bird gets the worm kind of thing. Some loads would pop up, but it was nothing like it is today. It was basically whatever was on there for the day, and that's what you had to call on. And if you didn't get it, well, camp out till tomorrow, because it was tough. Everything was done by fax. So, swapping paperwork, contracts, all that stuff had to be faxed. Well, half the time the faxes wouldn't go through, or it'd fail halfway through. So you'd be standing by the fax machine for hours on end trying to get your paperwork faxed through. And then turn around, call the driver, give it all to him over the phone, because there was no texting. There was no sending it to the truck. There was no GPS.
Yep.
And I actually started early enough to where it was before majority of the drivers didn't even have cell phones. If you didn't have a load, you'd just say, all right, well, go find a payphone and call me in an hour. And they call you in an hour. All right, call me in another hour. You couldn't call them back because you had to wait until they called you. So, you'd book stuff on kind of a poke and hope, if you will, because you were, if the guy said he's going to be there Monday morning, well, he better dang well be there, because we just booked a load for him. And now I can't even call him to say what time are you going to be empty, or where are you at? Because you had no clue.
And DAT, so that's like I guess if you had to say there's several boards. There's Internet Truck Stop, there's DAT, there's 123 low board. There's so many, but DAT stands for dial a truck. So that's what its concept was back then. When the computer was there, it populated once a day with a bunch of shipments that brokers or even customers themselves that had subscriptions would post. And then at that point, as an operations, we would say, hey, this Seattle to Duluth, Minnesota is the perfect load. We'd call on it. Okay, we have the right type of truck. We have the right type of tarps or no tarp, whatever the situation is. And here's the loading date. Here's the delivery date. And then it comes to the negotiation side of what are you going to pay? And a lot of times that's a two-way street, right? I don't know how many times you go into a negotiation on a load and via a broker and they go, well, what do you need? And was that how it always was when you were doing it back then? Or was it very like, this is what I'm paying, and it was much more trustworthy?
I think in many cases they would just, that I can remember, just give the rate that they were trying to move it for. Which brings up a whole other thing, that the next piece of this whole puzzle is we didn't have Google Maps, or we didn't have PC Miler. So you had to look in the back of an atlas from the nearest major city to see what the miles were from there to there. And there was a few different little things you could buy at truck stops where you'd
the circles.
Yeah, you'd spin it and it'd show miles from major cities.
Yep.
So everything was off of, well, okay, he's here. That looks like it's about 20 miles from here. So everything was literally like,
it was very like
through a soup can.
Let me roll it back, because I think I'm going too fast in concept to make sure I paint this picture right. So back, let's say the 90s. Let's go with that era. The 90s, booking freight was you sent your truck from wherever he was at, and you knew he was landing somewhere. So he's delivering in Seattle. You would get on the DAT load board and say it's Monday morning. Well, at 7 a.m. Monday morning, that load board populates with available shipments. You would then hope that your driver's on track, so we didn't have GPS. So you're then hoping that he's on time for delivery. He's going to call in eventually from a payphone. When he does call in and says, okay, I'm empty, and you say, okay, I have a reload from this broker, then you would give him that information and hope that the address is right, or he could find it via local area. But before you got there, even, you were calling them, making sure that the shipment was right, making sure that the pay was adequate, trying to figure out the miles, because like you said, you couldn't reference a quick Google Maps or PC Miler or any way to say, okay, boom, 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 these stops. You had to kind of take their word for it. Oh, this is a 1,800 miles. That's what I'm going with. And then once you agreed, then the paperwork would come to you via fax. You didn't get an email. Email kind of blew up later on in the 2000s, but you'd get it via fax in the 90s. You'd wait for that phone to ring on the side of the fax machine, and you'd wait for it to print out its 20 pieces of paper. And keep in mind, you have to set up with this broker or customer to make sure that you're adequate for your DOT and you have authority and all the things that go with it. But then you also have to hope that you're going to get paid from this broker. Now, back then it was a little bit different. I feel like there was some trustworthiness that was just cemented in, and morals and ethics that were there compared to nowadays, which we'll get to. But so then you get through all that, you fill out this paper packet, you send it back, you then wait for this fax to come again with what we'll call a rate confirmation. And this rate confirmation has all the information that you need, sometimes handwritten, right? It's nothing fancy here. This is a handwritten piece of paper with load, delivery, specifics, and rate. And then you finally get that to your driver. When you did all that, what did you do with that piece of paper? Now it's a little bit different. I feel like my printer isn't even hooked up. I don't even use it.
You'd put it in a file and hold on to it, write the truck number on it, and then you'd haul it. And once it got done, then you'd send it to the back office, and they'd hold on to the actual paper copy until the driver actually turned in the bill of ladings, and then turn around, make copies of all that, and mail an invoice to the broker, which sometimes drivers wouldn't get back for 30 days. So you'd have paperwork riding around in a truck that you couldn't even invoice until the driver got back and turned it in, because there was, then eventually I switched it and found, we had an account, but got pre-printed labels from FedEx to give to each driver to drop their bills in the FedEx envelope and have them sent.
Once a week, they'd FedEx in their paperwork.
Yeah, because like I say, otherwise they'd have bills for. Eventually, the customer would call because they're like, I can't invoice for what I sold them until I get a signed bill of lading. So it kind of become an issue because they're like, it takes you 2 months to give me an invoice. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, look at the cash flow that you just lost.
It's interesting. So back then, that's what it took. Back in the 90s, that's what it took to book a brokered load for a truck. And if you didn't have a customer there, you would go through and work those relationships and work, I think Rolodexes, it's kind of funny to think of those things, but everyone had a Rolodex.
That was another thing I was going to say is you first looked at the screen, seen what was there, but then you had your Rolodex and you had brokers that you worked with out of certain areas. So then you'd call all those brokers in the Rolodex, hey, what do you got? Nothing. All right. See you later. Call the next, and just keep going about it that way.
Those are the tools that you had in the tool chest back then, is that Rolodex?
Rolodexes were a big thing. I mean, they were at every phone, and you had big cards full of them, and that was the harder thing for me to learn, because obviously I was 15 when I was working in the office dispatching with my uncles, and he'd right away, call this guy, call that guy. Well, I didn't know. So I would look on the screen more often than not, because he's kind of computer illiterate, and see what I could find and call on it. But yeah, it was a lot of times by 9 o'clock in the morning, your day was toast. You're done.
Yeah. If you didn't book it, because everybody knew that it updated once a day. So if you didn't proactively get after it and secure the freight, you were waiting until the next day.
Done.
Interesting.
So patience levels with drivers is a whole different thing, because call me in an hour. All right, call me in 2 hours because I'm tired of you calling me. I don't have nothing, Then, all right, well, you might as well call me at 3, But then to make that decision, what time do I tell this guy to call me? Because what if we do get a load?
Right.
I don't know how many times we'd get a load and you couldn't even get a hold of the driver to go get it. And we'd miss it because you had no way to call the guy.
I'm telling you, it's a funny thing thinking about the whole process.
Or the guy's supposed to deliver and customers calling, we're, screaming. I can't tell you. I have no clue. When he calls me, or whatever, where is he? I don't know. Talk about feeling helpless.
Yeah. Well, I just love how much trust there was in the industry back then, though. Like, you loaded it, and you didn't have GPS, you didn't have macro point, you didn't have all of these ways to track a driver in the shipment that come with things now. And it's obviously much deeper now, and there's reasons why, which we'll go into. But that old school process was something special, comical in its nature, with how it worked out and how it started to grow and evolve, but yet so much trustworthiness and so much that was there, and things were real, and you didn't have to, like, when somebody said, I'll give it to you, they held their word. You didn't have that, sometimes nowadays they'll tell 3 companies yes, and then they pick who's closest. Maybe you can get there half hour earlier, so they're dropping off, but they gave you that verbal commitment nowadays, and that was not how it was back then. So yes, Rolodex. And funny thing is Dad still has relationships in this industry that are still tied back to those Rolodex cards. There's still people he talks to that call him on a regular basis, just like they did 20 years ago, talking about, this is how we did it. I worked with your dad for 20 years, love working with him. He's an honest guy, he gets it done, and that still carries through. So super cool. Moving forward into current day, a little bit different process, similar in nature, but a little bit different process for securing freight on the road. And the process works in the same timeline, right? You're proactively looking in your system. You're reaching out to current customers. Hey, is there anything you have that we can help with? You reference your own system. So you actually have a database that you can reference for where you've hauled, who you've hauled it for, and you work those angles. If those don't come to fruition, then you go to the broker board. And like I said, there's multiple versions of this. And then it's kind of that, okay, now let's put some parameters in. Let's put Duluth to Lexington, Kentucky, and let's see what fits the glove. How much deadhead on each end? What is the freight weight? What is the commodity? Does it need tarp? No tarp? Does it need V boards? Does it need 12-inch edge protectors? Like the list goes on and on of how specific freight gets. But I think one of the most dynamic parts is the negotiation side now, and that is so important because obviously you need to make the most money you can in a trucking industry, right? Fuel, equipment, tires, everything is expensive, and there's so many variables. And then layer in some sit time to get loaded at a steel mill or something, and you really can turn a brokered load upside down. But negotiating, what do you like? If you're booking a load and broker says, "What do you need?" We have tools now. We have tools that can tell us because they look at network and say, "This is a filler lane. Like, here's what you need. This is what it needs to be profitable." But even when you get a benchmark, the market doesn't just say, "Oh, because Derek said he needs this much money, we're going to give it to you." It could be substantially lower. What are your tactics for getting more money? Like, what do you do and say, "This pays," or "What do you need?" And you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna throw this number out there first of all. Let's just, for example, use $4 a mile." And they come back and say, "Well, actually, I can only pay you $2 a mile." What are you going to say?
Well, negotiations back then was a lot tougher because you knew it's like, okay, this is the only load I see on this screen. So am I going to really fight with this guy? Because in most cases there might be multiple people in that office and somebody be like, "Got it covered," or whatever. So it was just, I'll take it, in most cases. But then otherwise, if you could, depending on what the rate was and what all you had to do, then you might try to get, typically on majority of loads, unless it's a upside down market and they're just screaming for trucks, negotiations were, anywhere from $50 to $100. That was about tops that you could squeeze out of somebody.
But what about now?
Now it all depends on, again, you got to run the miles from where the truck is, where you're going and where you're ending up. And then, look at it analytically, like, okay, what poises us to be successful at this, or at least get us to where we can reload, customer freight or what it might be, and then run it. And there's times where, yeah, we really would like to do the load, but it's like, I need X, or this just does not work. Yeah. I'm going backwards at this point. I might as well just have the truck deadhead.
Yep. And that's such a hard spot to be in. And we talk to all of our planners and we hear it all the time. Like you had said, there could be the perfect lane, but they're trying to pay too cheap on it. And drawing that line of, okay, the faster we get to a customer reload, the better we are. The faster we get back in network, the better we are. But then you're also going, how can you support these rates? You know what I mean? Like, why would I help you? Why would I help you? Because it's making you look good as a broker at such a low rate. So there's like ethics involved in, you're trying to strip away the emotion, but it still gets layered in there. And then you're looking at the real profitability of that shipment there's all those variables. And then, so that say the load is, like you said, the ideal load. What do you try to do when you're asking for more money? Like, what do you work in there? Do you try to be knowledgeable about what it takes to get this done? Or do you go right to like, I just need this or I can't do it? Or do you use, there's probably a dozen tricks of the trade. I got to talk to my supervisor. Let me try to come back with this. I'll call the driver. What kind of tactics do you use to get more money?
It really depends on what the load is, where it's going, and how bad do you need it. But I mean, at the end of the day, making the most logical decision, and depending on what the money is, because nowadays with where freight rates have been on the spot market or what brokers are trying to move them, sometimes you're asking for $500 more than they're offering. It's a big gap.
Yeah.
And I got a truck. I can pick it up. He could be there in an hour, but I need this, and kind of sell it off your reputation. Obviously, with 30 years in the business, our name is pretty well known throughout the brokerage network, and they know that we're an asset-based carrier, and 9 times out of 10, we get the job done and get it done on time and done correctly. So that alone, in many cases, when talking to a broker, they'll say, yeah, I know you guys, I know you'll get it done. I'm willing to pay a little extra, just because there's so many shady fly-by-night operations out there nowadays that have burned brokers very badly. So there is that, you earned your keep, or you got your notch in the belt to say, hey, I'm willing to pay these guys more because I know they're going to get it done and they're going to get it done right.
Yeah.
Or brokers secure something with you way further out, just like, yeah, this one's coming, but here, take care of it. I know you guys will handle it.
Yeah.
We have that relationship with multiple different brokers that do very good, and we do good for them. And it's a good alliance.
Yep. Yeah, you need them. I mean, this industry, our goal is to have as much customer freight as possible, but we'd be naive to say that there's not value in having brokers, because there's just, like I said, new manufacturing, job site deliveries. We get into some crazy areas that might be once every 6 months. There's no way you could sustain a customer in a once in 6 month, 6 months when you have that kind of capacity. So yes, they're a necessary evil in this industry that you have to have, or there's just money not to be made. But yeah, so you're right. It's unique, because there's plenty of times where you're going, are you kidding me? $2,000? I need $3,000 to do this load. And they might go, okay, let me call you back. And then all of a sudden, you don't know what their margin is, right? That's a hidden number. So we don't know what's on the load. We don't know if they bid it at actual, like an asset carrier. We don't know if they went in and dropped the rates to get some loads. Like, we have no idea. So you stand your ground, you throw it what's necessary, what you need. You wait for them to come back, and then the negotiation goes through that phase of, well, my boss says I can do this, or, well, I only have 2,200 in the load. Well, I need 25. Well, okay, it's got to be out by tomorrow morning. Do you have an empty truck? Yes, truck's in. You go through all those short little banters back and forth, and then you settle on a rate. And sometimes, like you said, you come out on the end like, this is what it needs, because you find the gray areas in the simple freight, right? This is a complicated load. It has 3 stops. This is a load that goes to northern Minnesota and it's 20 below. Okay, like, they have trouble finding some carriers to do that, and you can come rolling in like a knight in shining armor and take care of the job and get it done fast and promptly. And like you said, having those relationships that we've forged over time with many different brokers, where 3PLs, third-party logistics, all of that we've built over time, it starts to help with relationships. And it's funny because, Keep Trucking Personal, even though there's all this technology out there for brokers to use, this still comes down to nowadays, because there's so much fraud in this industry. And when I say fraud in this industry, there's people that are pretending to be they're a chameleon carrier. They're pretending to be Kivi Brothers Trucking or whatever that company name is, and then they load this shipment underneath our name fraudulently, and then they take the load, and sometimes they'll steal it, sometimes they'll deliver it, and they work the paperwork where they get paid, but it never even happened. And there's so much fraud out there. So all these brokers now, as advanced as it gets, they're paranoid that it's stuff you see on the news, right? Where people are calling anyone, and older people succumb to this all the time, where they get pranked. Hey, we need your social security number and this. It's like the same in the trucking industry. There's all this fraud. And so now the brokers are like, we need to go with who we can trust. And like you had said, an asset-based carrier for 30 years, we've hauled many loads for you, or maybe we haven't, but we're not here to play around. Like, here's the situation. Here's what we offer. And it kind of gives you that leg up. But it's such an interesting process. And I'd be curious to hear how some other companies deal with it. I'm sure on the surface, 30,000 foot level, it's all the same. But I'm curious to see what technology, you can use. Like I said, we can dump in city to city and it'll populate us. It'll tell us a rate. That's fine and dandy. But of course, we're a for-profit industry. So we're always going to say we want more. And, finding that line of like, it's acceptable or not is the dance. And it's hard.
Yeah. Where we were, obviously we were a lot smaller back then, but to think back on all of that stuff, we had no Google Maps, we had no PC Miler, we had none of that stuff. Rand McNally, so you couldn't even determine your miles. drivers were on paper logs. You didn't usually get those, trying to collect the month's log sheets was like pulling teeth half the time. So you never even understood how many miles you actually put on. Plus you were going off of what they turned in on their log sheets, which we tell them the right odometer readings and stuff, but who knows, it's kind of an honor system. So you didn't even know what you operated at a rate per mile for the month until probably, if not a month later, if not longer, to even realize, were we profitable this month? You had no clue. All you could do is just haul as the best you could because you didn't have all the metrics to put in place to even look at it, to where now, today, it's running live as you're rolling all day long. It's incredible. There's so many things that advanced with technology that made things so much better. And then there's so many other things, like the fraud. And you never had fraud and all that stuff back then.
Right.
There was none of that. You never even worried about that.
Cargo theft. There's so much that goes on nowadays that you're dealing with, and you layer all that in. So, as a broker, yes, they don't own any trucks or have that, but they have a stressful job too with all of this going on. And, you choose the wrong carrier and all of a sudden your shipment's gone. It's gone. You know what I mean? And you would think in this day and age, things don't just disappear.
Oh, yeah.
You would think in this day and age, and I'm talking truckloads. Let's not go small pallets or this or that. This day and age, you would think that a truckload would not just disappear like it does. But anybody that's familiar with the trucks, the old Peterbilts, the old Kenworths back in the day with the salt and all that, the door locks never even worked. You couldn't get a key in the things. You'd break the key off. So all the trucks, these guys would be in truck stops wherever, trucks wide open, keys in the ignition, or they didn't even have a key for the ignition. It was just push a button. Yeah. So what it was to what it is today, it's absolutely incredible. Every time you go out to a truck, they couldn't lock it. You could never. Right. The Peterbilt keys were some of the worst ones. The way the locks work, you'd break. Well, and you'd have a different door lock to an actual ignition key, or a different door key to an ignition key, and things. So it's such a different industry in 20 to 30 years. The change that it's went from how you secure freight on the road. So this, like I said, is brokered freight. It's not customer freight, and how you secure it and what you deal with. And now, like I said, they're a necessary evil. You get this situation where it can be so much work to book a brokered load. And I think the drivers often, I know they're involved because many of these brokers want to talk to the driver, but often they forget how much communication comes in.
Drivers get frustrated because they're saying, why are these guys calling me and doing all this, which we try to limit as much as we can and give them the tracking off of our GPS. But these guys have no clue what we go through. There's been a couple times where a load was booked and I had to send copies of my driver's license to the broker to get the load. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. What's next? Fingerprinting? They're going to have to scan. It's just absolutely incredible, but it's what society's gotten to nowadays.
Right. Well, and drivers, like you said, the pictures, that is a unique thing that's more relevant here in the last 6 to 12 months is brokers asking for pictures of the drivers in front of the truck. Mm-hmm. Like send me a real picture, and they'll say have him do the hang loose sign or have him hold up 4 fingers, and you're like, as you can imagine, calling a professional driver, hey, I need a selfie with you giving me the peace sign right now. Like what is this? What are we doing? And that wasn't anything we had to do back in the day, and we see it now because the people have been burned with that theft and that fraud, and I think shippers are really leaning towards asset-based even more now because those nuances keep happening and they keep happening. And like I said, you would think this day and age shipments wouldn't just go AWOL and they're gone. They're missing somehow, some way. And it's like, how do you track this down? And then there's no investigation. Nobody has time on the law enforcement side to put any due diligence into it. They just say, is anybody hurt? No. Okay, file it with your insurance. Well, what is that? How do we move through? How do we hold any justice to this process? And so, you have to have high standards. So from our perspective, that's why we put Motive and we have OmniCam on the back of our trucks to help watch the shipment. So it's all there. It's recording because we're trying to protect our drivers from tarps being stolen, from headache racks being approached and things taken, to even somebody trying to monkey around on your shipment that's on our deck. So there's just so much that we try to do to, having rules and policies in place of where you can unhook and where you could leave a truck unattended. And I mean, man, and then let's add a holiday in the mix, and you're like you're, code red, like, okay, everybody keep your eyes peeled, because there's people out there that are, wanting to do the wrong things. And yeah, what an interesting evolution of booking a broker load from a green screen to once a day calling, to putting your quarter in the payphone and waiting for your driver to call, to nowadays send me a selfie in front of your truck before you're loaded. And when you're loaded, send me a picture of your load. And then once you're loaded, send me a picture of your load and your bills. And once you get on site to deliver, before you even can do anything, I need those bills, or we're threatening to keep money from you. Like the restrictions and all the, little triggers that they place to do anything they can. I'm sure there's reasons they're there, right? Every law is written in blood. But they make it really interesting sometimes for the operations and the drivers to play ball.
Yeah, jumping through loopholes. But again, most of the things we're fighting or rules that are in place are because somebody did that to upset them, and now that's why it is. So again, you're laying in the bed you made.
All right. Well, in aviation, they always talk about anytime there's a new process or rule or regulation implemented, is because it's written in blood. Somebody messed up. And it's the same in trucking. You work at a company and something starts popping in there and you're like, why are we doing this now? Yes, there's proactive ways to avoid what you hear in the industry. But usually somebody's looking for something happened, and we have to be vigilant. And when it happens, you can share it with everybody, and you're trying to be, hey, this is never going to happen again, and we're going to do our darndest to make sure it doesn't.
Yeah, it's definitely amazing to hear through the years. Obviously, I'm not as old as, talking with, say, our dad and those guys. Those guys have a whole nother layer further back to where, you give the driver $3,000 cash to pay for fuel and send them to the West Coast and back, or whatever it may be. But you had to give them the cash up front because, credit card things didn't really exist. I was a little bit on the cusp, obviously on the credit card side of things, where each driver had their own Visa, which was quite interesting. You had guys that did very well, and you had guys that bought the whole household goods and every other thing on it. I'm sorry, I gave them the wrong card when I was at the thing. It's like, well,
that Toys R Us happened to grab.
Mistakenly grabbed the card, the work company card, and gave that when you were at the gas station. Okay.
Yeah. Well, here, there.
Those are the things we had to deal with, to where nowadays, you have an itemized fuel card. They can get cash advances on. You don't have to do a T-check number, or, before a cash advance, they had to call and you had to get a T-check number. They had to fill out the check, call a bunch of numbers, get it authorized, approved, so where things have gone is definitely much easier for the
communication is easier. Communication is easier for sure. You have email and call, and like you said, there's portals and there's EDI. The loads come right into our system. Like, it has gotten way more advanced and for the better. It's just, things change, right? And things evolve, and now fraud is right in our face all the time, and we're trying to defend that. And so if you're a driver, or even if you've never been a driver and you were curious, like, how do these trucks stay loaded all the time? And how does Kivi have customers all over the country? Well, you can't have a customer in every city, and you need brokers to fill those gaps. So that's how it works. There's many plugs to how you can do better here and how you can secure more freight here, and being honest, there's so many times that sometimes you're trying to play like, oh, he's running behind, and you don't want to be up front. Well, there's so many things that come out in this industry, and being honest, doing the right thing, being ethical, it just keeps like showing that that's the only way to operate in this industry. And I'm excited that you're able to share some of that, because you were right at the cusp of when technology was actually implemented and starting to come into this game, and how it's evolved and how it's changed it for everything. Yeah,
it's definitely changed tremendously through the years, and continues to change and will continue to change as the evolution evolves. There's constantly there's always something new technology wise. I mean, constantly getting emails from people calling, trying to deploy different things, but the change is inevitable, and we're just here for the ride, adapt to it the best you can.
Like I said, I know we're headed on the right path. The keeping trucking personal, building relationships on a customer level, getting to know them and their industry, and paying attention to it. And, it would sound like common sense, but you'd be surprised the feedback we get, and some of our legacy customers we've had from the beginning, we've been bootstrapping it the whole time from back. I think you even still do it just recently. Go pick up shipments from customers. Like, there's no failure. There's no room for failure in this game. And that's the level of commitment we give. But I just wanted to kind of highlight what it takes to keep a truck loaded out on the road. And if you see one that's, in a unique area, you might be wondering where that came from. And that's why we are always looking at freight going down the road. Like, we're always just paying attention to what's moving out there, because you might find yourself in that area needing some loads, and that's what you end up hauling. So, negotiations play into there. There's all kinds of tools and tips, and like I said, we have technology, but it doesn't always work, and you have to be knowledgeable about what you're hauling, because you can book a bad load. And when I mean bad, you can show up and it's not fit for our equipment. So you have to be very in tune with what we're able to haul and why we haul certain things and why we won't haul certain things, and understand, is this the right way to go about it, and make sure you set the driver up for success, because you can show up to load something, and if the driver doesn't have what they need, or you book a bad load, like I just said, it can be frustrating and costly. So there's so much that goes into it, but that's just a quick surface level view of what we deal with.
Yeah, it's exactly it. There's way more than I think in many cases people think is done from the backside of it. Not to, obviously we know the drivers do a ton of work too. So, but just so they realize that the people, the non-driver staff that's working in the offices, trying to keep them moving, it's all day long getting peppered. And when that one truck's running behind for say delivery and reload, it can create an hour, if not longer, disaster for that one person trying to reset appointments and then reach out to the next one and adjust that and explain what happened and why it happened and how it happened. And that's just for one truck.
Yep.
So even just I'm sure it's that way at many companies, when you can't get a hold of that person because you just called them and they didn't answer right then and there, hanging up and calling them again immediately doesn't help anything. It's because we're on the phone with somebody else, and 9 times out of 10 dealing with one of those cases, or talking to a customer, getting something set up. It's not that we're, let's let them hang out to dry for the next hour. It's because this job it's vicious, and it's sometimes
fast-paced,
very time consuming.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I hope today's episode gave you a deeper understanding of this process and how it works and what everybody puts into it. And, there's a lot of little nuances that we could dive into, and it's exciting. I love this process, especially the negotiation side. I like getting into that personally. So, stay tuned for more episodes where we're going to keep diving into these topics that many people might not know about. And just real quick, next episode is our 1-year anniversary of Keep Trucking Personal. So excited to just kind of reflect back on what we went through, my personal growth, just of how to approach this podcast, the topics we've covered and the people we've met. So until next time, keep trucking personal.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keep Trucking Personal. We appreciate you taking the time to explore the heart and soul of Kivi Brothers Trucking with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know your thoughts. Tune in next time as we continue our journey together, diving deeper into what makes us a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those who aspire to be part of something truly extraordinary. Until then, keep trucking, and we'll catch you on the next episode.